it's John Gierach that says his choices have always been for more time and less money. And that's kind of, I think, what we've done.
That's our motto.
Can you imagine being the fly fisherman who was this summer standing in Cobbessy stream where it enters the Kennebec River? He looked around his feet and saw a sturgeon up to 10 feet long going right by his feet as he was fishing there.
One of the things that certainly defined my childhood was just time outdoors. So that was where we focused all of our time as kids and just throughout my young life, adventuring and exploring in the woods and the fields.
They're so precious, I would really refrain from killing any of those fish, mostly because I have such a deep respect for those fish and how valuable and what a precious resource we have here in Maine.
Welcome to Flyline Podcast, where we enjoy the interesting stories behind the legendary guides and luminaries connected to Maine fishing. I'm Michael Jones. Today we'll be talking with our special guest, Josh Brown. Josh Brown owns Mayfly Nets and lives in Scarborough, Maine with his wife Courtney and children Ezekiel and Ela. In this inspiring conversation, we will hear about Josh's unique life journey. It is one of resilience, purpose, and healing. Born in Massachusetts, but aspiring to call Maine home, Josh shares early experiences exploring the state's lakes and rivers, which sparked a lifelong connection to the outdoors. After leaving high school, Josh found his path in the trades and later joined the Marine Corps, where his deployment to Afghanistan shaped his life in profound ways. While his service brought purpose, it also came with challenges. Following his military service, Josh transitioned into nursing, working in ER roles across the country before eventually finding a more balanced life and career at the VA. During this period, Josh began to embark on a new journey, getting back in his woodworking shop and launching Mayfly Nets, a heartfelt tribute to his grandmother. What began as a therapeutic activity has ultimately grown into a mission to create beautiful handcrafted custom landing nets. Josh's work with Mayfly Nets and Project Healing Waters combines his passion for the outdoors with his commitment to giving back, creating custom fishing nets etched with images of rivers and lakes that serve as both tools for anglers and symbols of his journey toward healing and purpose. It comes with humble honor to share Josh's unique story with our audience. Josh, welcome to the Flyline Podcast.
Mike, thanks for having me. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to come down here and have a conversation. I really appreciate it. This is a good opportunity for me to share my story. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I've been listening to several episodes over the past couple of weeks, trying to cram in as many as I can to prepare. And I got to say, I love what you're doing.
I appreciate that. That feels good. And the podcast is really about the people that are on it, right? It's not just about me. As a matter of fact, I try to make it less about me and more about the people. And and just you and I talking, you reached out to Sherry and I and said, hey, I think I have a story to tell.
I did.
You do have a story to tell. And it's a very compelling story just in hearing you explain it to me privately. And it means a lot that you're willing to share it publicly.
Yeah, I've never shared anything publicly like this before. So this is all new for me. I have been following Jeff Davis around a little bit, and he's been a great mentor to me, giving me pointers along the way. And I really appreciate that from him. But I kind of fell upon to the podcast with that story.
Yeah.
And I was hooked afterwards. And like I said, I really, really love that you're highlighting not the fishing stories, right? You're not saying like, oh, I went to the Bahamas or I went to, let me tell you about my fishing adventure. It's really highlighting the people and the stories that make Maine fly fishing what it is.
Thank you. That's the takeaway for me too.
Yeah.
I won't repeat what I always say about two white guys talking about how to catch a brown trout, but I don't find that very interesting to listen to.
No.
And everyone has a story,
right?
Yourself included. And some people, they're all connected to fly fishing, right? So let's go back a little bit, if you don't mind. Tell me about, growing up. Where did you grow up, Josh? And were you fishing as a kid at all?
So as much as I want to say that I'm a Mainer, I am not. I was born in Massachusetts. I've tried to earn the rite of passage along the way, but it seems somewhat unattainable to be called a Mainer, but I love Maine. I really do. I grew up in Massachusetts. My father was a electrical engineer, or well, still is. And my mother was a school teacher. She specialized in children with disabilities, learning disabilities, children with autism, things like that. And she's just has an amazing soul. I don't know how she does it, but she does it. So she's great. So grew up, came to Maine. I forget when the first time of coming to Maine was, but I was a young child, and we went to Shapley Square Pond. My cousins had a camp up there. We would go hang out at the camp, and that's kind of what introduced me into Maine and the lake and the rivers and everything it has to offer. That was kind of my first taste into everything. And then we as a family were all hooked. At that point, we wanted to do what I suppose everybody in Massachusetts wants to do, right? Buy your Maine lake property. So that's what we did. We got a place on Little Sebago, which is a great little area.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It really is. It's
high
a great
water quality.
fishery too.
It's a great fishery,
it's a
right?
Great fishery.
Yeah, I lived on Little Sebago for just short of a year, maybe not quite that long even, just renting before I bought my home in Naples. And I loved it down there. It's quiet. You know, it's beautiful. It hasn't been spoiled.
It hasn't.
You don't see a bunch of jet skis momming around on Little Sebago.
You might get a couple on the weekends here and there from some renters or something, but for the most part, Little Sebago is just a small community lake.
That's where you met Courtney.
And that's where I met Courtney. She worked at the old coal farms.
Oh, yeah.
As a waitress. She was friends with a mutual friend. I went over in our boat to pick up our friend, and Courtney was there. She had her dog with her and was like, "Oh, I can't come because I have my dog." I looked at her and I thought that was the silliest thing I ever heard, because why wouldn't I let a dog
All
in my
aboard
boat for my pretty girl, right?
All aboard.
Yeah. I'm gonna let this pretty girl in whatever she brings on my boat. I got off the boat, picked up her dog, put the dog on the boat, said, "Now you don't have an excuse." And she got on the boat and we kind of took it from there.
And you guys have been together ever since?
And we have.
You were young then.
We were very young. I wasn't even drinking age
Yeah.
at that point. We were married before I was legal drinking age.
You were 21.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes, thanks.
You guys are going to make it. I know a lot of couples that got together young and they're in love.
Yeah, and it's that what kind of keeps us going. We're really good for each other. We're different in a lot of ways and similar in a lot of ways. I don't want it to sound like it was seamless. I mean, there were obviously tumultuous years, as any marriage has, but we learned from each other along the way, and we're still learning from each other, and we're able to support each other through our endeavors.
I just want to clarify something you said earlier was Jeff Davis, and Jeff Davis owns the Maine Fly Company
In Yarmouth.
right? And
Builds beautiful fly rods.
oh, he does. He built several, and I love them. I caught the biggest brook trout I've ever caught in my life this summer in Labrador on his 6-weight,
Amazing.
and it's a gorgeous fly rod. I'm proud to fish with it. But we're down in Scarborough, Maine.
We are.
Yeah.
In Scarborough.
Yeah, and you set up a net building company, Mayfly Nets, and we're going to talk about that more in the second half of the podcast. But what I'd like to do, if you're willing to share, is let's talk about you graduating from high school and joining the armed forces.
So, funny story, I didn't graduate from high school.
Okay. It was an assumption I shouldn't have made. I apologize.
No. No hard feelings at all. I'm happy to share it. I was a bit of a rebellious teenager. I didn't like school. I went to a vocational high school and studied carpentry, cabinet making when I was there. I pretty much only showed up for that because that's what I like to do. And the academic side of things kind of fell to the wayside. It wasn't really important to me. And then I got on with a trade company. I was making money down in Massachusetts. I was making good money. My friends were still in high school. I thought that I can just kind of get into the trades. I can hone my skills and go that route.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I dropped out of high school. I tried to go back a couple times just to finish, but dropped out of high school. I ended up getting my GED from Crane and Gloucester up here after I moved to Maine. And yeah, that's kind of my high school experience and a bit of my entry into woodworking. I do come from family of woodworkers. My grandfather's a beautiful cabinet maker down in Massachusetts. He would make the most beautiful furniture that I've ever seen. I've always been envious of him just in his skill. And I've always looked up to him for his skill. That's kind of the high school and carpentry intro of my life where things started. I don't know if you want to jump back to growing up and coming into Maine, but I think it's important to mention for later on in the story that when we came to Maine, and my first memories of fishing aren't necessarily with my father. Like, he's not a big fisherman. He could put a worm on a hook and everything like that and cast a spin rod and catch a fish. You know, he's proficient, but just wasn't his thing. But my grandmother, Nana May was the kind of the catalyst of my fishing experience. She's what really kind of got me into it.
Tell me about her.
Nana May was this irreverent, quirky little old lady who would tell you what was on her mind, just like it was. Maybe it was a little bit of the early onset dementia, maybe not, but yeah, she was quirky. She was very honest and blunt, and we all kind of loved her for it.
Kind of a stoic New Englander.
Kind of stoic New Englander, yeah.
And she fished.
She did.
So she got you into it.
She got me into it, and funny enough, she grew up on Little Sebago. So her family, right by the second Narrows on Little Sebago, there's a big, I don't know if you recall, but there's like this big house with this big beach, and she used to own that camp. So Little Sebago was familiar to her. I have the greatest memories. And it wasn't fly fishing that she taught me. It was just an enjoyment of being on the water and being outside, enjoying being on the water, being in the lake, being present and enjoying what you have in front of you.
Yeah.
Because that's what you have.
Yeah. Maybe growing up in Massachusetts, being exposed to that in Maine really opened your eyes.
Oh, it was, it was night and day. Like, you know, Massachusetts, I grew up in a suburb of Boston.
Right.
So we were right outside Boston. So we had all of everything that comes along with that, all of the people, all the traffic, not a lot of access to rivers, brooks, streams, lakes. I didn't feel it was as accessible down there. So we came up to Maine and I spent most of my time fishing up here.
Yeah. So what got you out of working in the trades to join the Marine Corps?
Oh, so what got me out of working in the trades to join the Marine Corps, I felt like I screwed up somehow. When I dropped out of high school, I felt like I made a bad decision. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I'm where I am now, and I'm okay with that. I'm happy with where I am now. I didn't really have much purpose, didn't really have much training, much education. I didn't really feel like I had any validity or belonging anywhere, and I wanted that. So I joined the Marine Corps, which gave me a great sense of belonging and purpose for some time.
How old were you when you joined the Marine Corps?
Yeah, I was 19 or 20.
Yeah.
I joined at the recruiting station in Saugus, Massachusetts. And I was always one of those kids that was like, oh, I don't need college. I don't need school. I'm good with my hands. I can learn things quickly. I can catch on. That worked for me for a time, but it didn't sustain me. It didn't give me that purposeful feeling for life. And I really wanted that.
So you thought you'd find that in the military?
I thought I'd find it in the military.
But you didn't?
I had purpose. I felt purposeful when I was in. When I graduated, I felt like I served a purpose. When I graduated from boot camp, you feel all gung-ho and ready to go and purposeful and everything like that. And then I feel like the job kind of wears on you sometimes. The constant changes, not knowing information and then going here, there, and everywhere. Not knowing when you're going to go or where you're going to go, and it can be taxing.
Be more specific. Where were you deployed?
I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. And before we get too far into this, I don't want anybody to think that I'm some kind of hard-charging gunslinger that is, coming on this podcast.
No, you were serving your country, Josh, and thanks for your service.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So we went to Afghanistan in 2011, deployed as a unit. We left May 1st, the day Osama bin Laden was killed. Our total deployment was 14 months. I extended. I wanted to stay longer, so I chose to extend for another 7 months. When I was in Afghanistan, 2, maybe 3 weeks, I was at my ECP. I was at an entry control point. That was my duty. I was in charge of search and seizure of things. Contraband coming onto base, anything like that. But it was maybe 2 weeks, and we had just relieved 325, who is a unit out of Texas. They were going home, and this Afghan male he just kind of starts walking by, and very suspicious. So, we're obviously on guard. and then he decides to rush the gate. So he rushes us, and we don't know if this guy has a bomb on him or if he's strapped. We don't know. So I, like the idiot I am, jump on him. Thank God he didn't pop or didn't blow up or anything like that. But just the fact that I was like 2 weeks in and this happened was just right around my birthday too. Because the scary event happened. I don't know if you can call it traumatic or not, but definitely thought that we were gonna die.
Yeah.
That was my job for a little while, and that's what I did until I got transferred to Bomb Stop. So Bomb Stop is exactly what it sounds like. It's a place that stops bombs. That's where I was for the rest of the deployment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's another ECP, another control point. Our job was to have a truck. We had this big MRAP. It's a big military vehicle, like bigger than a Humvee, but not quite as big as a semi-truck. And it's armored.
Yeah.
This truck, in this instance, is designed to absorb any impact from VBIDs, from vehicle-borne IEDs. So what you would do would be drive in front of the VBID and absorb the explosion.
So convoy coming behind it doesn't.
Right.
Were you in that vehicle?
Everybody else. That was my main job.
Oh
I
my God.
I was the gunner for that vehicle.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't want to say I was a gunner, but we cycled through gunner, driver, and yeah, there was a lot of perceived threat. Right.
You had to be on pins and needles 24 hours a day.
Right.
Ow. Ow, that must have been awful.
It was taxing, definitely. It was kind of where I wanted to be in a way too, right?
Right.
I'm one of the people that wanted to be in the action. I wanted to be like, and I think there's something to be said for that as well. We all feel like we never did enough, no matter what we did. Yeah. Whether you were out there kicking doors in Fallujah, or if you were out, out back home in garrison, we never feel like we did enough. But, I feel like that shouldn't be a barrier to anybody to sharing their story or getting.
I think that's a developmental thing too. I think you were at a time in your life where you wanted to define who you were, probably.
Yes.
And that was a really easy way to do it, to say, hey, put me in the front. Yeah. I'm ready to do this. I want to be the lead sled dog in this Iditarod.
Yes.
And this Iditarod was war.
Right.
Man.
So we didn't lose any people of our unit. We lost a lot of our IED dogs. Our IED dogs saved a lot of lives. And, it's...
Just for the audience, an IED is improvised explosive device.
Yeah. So these dogs were trained to sniff out and warn us if there was an IED or some bomb-making materials or anything like that.
And of course, you have a connection to these dogs as well.
Oh, yeah.
So losing a dog is, to me, equivalent to losing...
I can't imagine. Like, it hurt me,
right,
being a bystander, right? But I can't imagine the handlers,
right?
Like the guys that actually had the relationships with these dogs. I can't imagine what they went through. I just give them so much credit and so much grace that they could do that. They would target our dogs. They would try to target our dogs because they knew that they were there to sniff out IEDs. So they would target the dogs and shoot the dogs.
From a sniper standpoint.
If you could call them snipers, from tactical, well-aimed, lot of luck shot.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, those dogs saved a lot of lives. And, while I was out there too, there were 3 guys that got decapitated, maybe 100 yards from us.
Wow.
3 nationals, Afghani nationals. We found them, and they were what they were doing was supplying us with probably just the crap that we don't need, like the Rippets. Rippets are energy drinks in Afghanistan. I equate it to liquid meth, probably something you shouldn't be drinking, but we all did it anyways to keep awake and keep alert. And sometimes you can find them in the States, but yeah, probably just stuff like that. And to think that these guys lost their lives,
right?
Even you can't quantify life, right? You can't say that like one life is more than another, right? But that's what the military does in a way. I can't tell you that their lives were any more valuable than anybody else's.
Right.
So, and they,
That's an interesting perspective.
Whether-
Because it is exactly your mission, is to say we're here because one person's life is worth more than another.
Right.
Yeah, it's just an interesting perspective.
and if you think about it, that's kind of the basis of the military and my job, my experience, right? Go be bomb stop, drive this truck in front of the bomb and explode. And, it kind of gives you a value to your life. Like, is life even worth anything? It kind of makes you question that. Like, what's my life worth if it's so easily sacrificed? But what's it sacrificed for? This great country, right?
Right.
And fly fishing, so we can fly fish.
Yeah.
In the on these beautiful rivers and streams. So I don't want any of this to be taken as me not grateful for my service. I am so grateful for my service and the opportunity the country provided me, and being able to serve and do something. I want to say good, but sometimes it doesn't feel all good.
Yeah.
That what I did.
There's no winners in war.
Right. So I think that's also something that's important to say, is there really is no winners in war.
No.
Yeah.
No, there isn't. Like I said before, I really appreciate you sharing that and appreciate your service. I mean, hearing it firsthand really makes me kind of bow my head.
Thank you. And honestly, I don't share this because I want your sympathy or no respect. I'm sharing it. I just want to kind of share my story with people, and we'll get into the healing aspect too. We're in the dark times now. We'll get to the lighter times as we progress. Hang around for the rest of it.
Yeah. And let's talk about that, Josh, because, the podcast is really described as being about the luminaries and legends of Maine fly fishing, and a lot of that is guides and stuff. But I worked for Project Healing Waters as a regional coordinator in New England back in the day when they were first starting.
Mm-hmm.
I got to meet a lot of guys like you. When you reached out to me and said, hey, I've started a little net business and it's going gangbusters and things are going really well, but I'm also a military veteran and I went through war, and I know that that's something that defines who I am. And it does.
Yeah, it does.
That resonates with me. And it should resonate with the audience, because I think that, the story comes full circle for you and for a lot of people. A lot of veterans get into fly fishing. There's a lot of restorative healing that comes from being on the water. There's a lot of restorative healing that comes from working with your hands, which is to say tying flies, making nets, maybe wrapping like guides on a fly rod, like Jeff does. Jeff was not a military guy, but we all get something out of our connection to the sport. So you're a perfect fit to be on the podcast for that reason, in my opinion.
I appreciate it.
In my opinion is the only opinion that matters when it comes to picking guests to be on the podcast.
Well, I very much appreciate that, because I have shared this with Courtney and my wife. I feel as though I have no place doing this or being here.
Yeah. Well, you stop that. That's fool talk, foolish talk.
But I appreciate you taking I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
The time.
So you have a career now.
I do.
Yeah. Tell me did you go back and do some schooling or?
Yeah. So when I got out in 2015, Courtney went to get her doctorate in Virginia. So we moved around a little bit.
What's her doctorate in?
Doctorate's in psychology. She's a clinical psychologist. We moved around a little bit for her schooling, her residency, and postdoc. We went from Virginia to Colorado to Vermont, and Vermont, we did something we never said we would do again, and moved back to Maine. And here we are, doing great. We love Maine. It's just so captivating.
Oh, in the Northeast, for sure. There's some really great places out west, but when it comes to the Northeast, Maine is the crown jewel. In my opinion.
It really is. Yeah. No.
And every time I go away, and Sherry and I say this a lot, anytime we travel for business or pleasure, and you get back and you're flying over Portland and in the jet getting ready to land, you go, this place is really special.
This is home. This is home. Yeah. So the schooling you were asking about, well, she was down there. Actually, it was before that. When I got out of the military, I started taking classes at Southern Maine Community College, which is a great school. I love Southern Maine Community College. I did some courses down there, got some great instruction, great education, got my EMT license down there.
Good for you.
And yeah, that's where my career in medicine kind of took off. As we discussed earlier, I'm one of those guys who always wants to be on the front lines, wanting more, have to have all the purpose. So I became an EMT, worked as an ER tech, which is you do blood draws and kind of like a nursing assistant for the ER. With
Triage stuff.
Triage stuff with a little more autonomy.
Checking blood pressures, temperatures, everything. Yeah.
Yep. So I did that for a while and I loved that job. I worked at Central Maine Medical Center. I loved the ER up there. I loved the group of people I was working with. They were great. I learned so much. I wanted to keep it going. I wanted to progress. So I became a nurse. I went to Norfolk State in Virginia and Centera Health Sciences College, got my degree in nursing. And then after I got my degree, we moved out to Colorado because Courtney was finishing up at that point, and she placed in Colorado. That's where she matched. She used the same residence match process that medical students use. So you put into a pool essentially, and they rank you, you rank them, and then if you have a match, that's how it works. She matched out there, and I started working in the ER out there because that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be where the action was. And I loved it. I was an adrenaline junkie. I couldn't get enough of it. The more trauma, the better.
I think you don't mean it quite like that, but
well, not quite in the cynical sense that it sounds, but kind of that's what I needed. That was my distraction.
Yeah, it defines an adrenaline junkie.
Right.
Yeah, right. I get it.
And as I'm sure you can imagine from being an ER nurse, you see some pretty terrible things. And some of that keeps me awake at night. I'd be lying if I said it did. It's not all Afghanistan that keeps me awake at night. It can be some of that. But
I worked as an EMT for Delta Ambulance in Farmington when I was in college. And just to share my own with you, just so you know that I can empathize with what you're saying, picking up the dead bodies was the part I didn't like. Mm-hmm. That was really hard for me. Mm-hmm. I was going to get into medicine. Yeah. And I think it was the EMT part of it that made me say, you know, there's a lot of depressing things that I'm seeing here. I just had to take pause, reset my thinking. Cause like you, when I was young, I was an adrenaline junkie too, you know, hucking off from waterfalls in a kayak. I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. So now that I'm 55, I look back and think, you know, you're lucky you didn't get whacked. Right. Being an EMT is a dangerous job. You're in the middle of a car crash. You're taking someone's infant child to the morgue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough stuff.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
But now you're doing something different.
Now I'm doing something different.
Yeah. You're nursing, but you're doing...
I am still nursing. I'm doing something completely different. I think it was a growing that I had to do.
A development.
A development, yeah. Kind of, a development that I made in realizing that, was it what I wanted? Yes. But was it what I needed? Was it good for my mental health? Was it good for my overall health? And when I got to that answer, and then the more important question for me too was, how is this impacting my family? And it was impacting them. It definitely was. It was wearing on me. I would work 3 shifts. I would come home. I'd be sleeping. I'd be on the couch. I wouldn't be able to function. I wouldn't really do much. I wasn't productive. I wasn't building nets. I wasn't building anything.
Let me inquire. When you're nursing, when you were nursing, or when you were an EMT, when
I was an ER nurse.
When you were ER, yep. Thank you. In Colorado,
in Colorado and here. So I've worked in Colorado. I worked at Dartmouth, and then I worked at Maine Medical Center for some time. And
so you were working the triple shifts and coming home and just got it.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. 12-hour shifts, coming home and just being a potato, just not doing anything at all.
Yeah. I can imagine.
And it was wearing on me. I just didn't feel productive. I lost my sense of purpose. I was attacked, choked, beat, punched, all at Maine Medical Center.
Yeah. You hear a lot about that in the news.
Yeah, I was in the news from that. There's some pictures of my face in the Bangor Daily News, I think, from the attack. But yeah, I mean, it was just not doing anything good for me.
Right.
And I lost that rewarding feeling too that I had. I was burnt out. I was cynical. I was mean. It wasn't working. So Courtney said, hey, there's a job opening up where I work at the VA. Would you like to come over? So I said, well, I'll apply and see where it goes, because I wasn't committed. I was just kind of just wanted to feel it out, see where things went. So I did the interview, and it was great. I met great people. They weren't anything like I thought they would be.
What was the job description?
The job description was for a primary care nurse, for care management. So a lot of like consult placement, a lot of like bumps and bruises, visits, things like that, which was a complete 180 from the ER. ERs, everything needs to be done now. Everything's life or death. You move over into primary care, and it's like you don't have this life or death pressure hanging over your head in most cases. It's a lot more structured.
Yeah.
It's a lot more structured.
And that's good for you.
It is.
Yeah. Well, it's good for everyone. But in your particular case, you lived years of chaos.
I did. Yeah.
And that was taking its toll on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing all
Definitely. That. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So how long have you been working now in the capacity you're working in now?
So I've been working as a care manager for a little over 2 years.
Great.
And I love it. It's so rewarding. It's really allowed me to kind of find out who I am outside of the trauma and the fast-paced life, and kind of slow things down and really find out who I am, what I enjoy,
right,
and what I need to heal.
Right. Yeah. And you decided to I'll tell you what, this is a great time for us to take a short break.
Yeah.
And let's come back and talk about how you transitioned at this period of your life into getting back into crafting with wood.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
In this Flyline flashback, we celebrate Shaw & Tenney, a historic Maine company renowned for its exceptional wooden oars and paddles. Founded in 1858 by Frank Tenney as the Orono Manufacturing Company, the business initially crafted oars, paddles, and tool handles. In the 1890s, it merged with the George Shaw Company of Boston, which became Shaw & Tenney. The name remains synonymous with quality craftsmanship today. For over 165 years, Shaw & Tenney has upheld traditional manufacturing techniques, much of it using original machinery from its early days. Operating near the Stillwater River, the company moved to its current location on Water Street in Orono in 1950. While oars and paddles remain their hallmark, Shaw & Tenney has expanded its offerings to include masts, spars, boat hooks, and flagpoles, products esteemed by clients ranging from the United States Coast Guard to the Carnival Cruise Line. Shaw & Tenney has changed hands only a few times throughout its history, with each new owner committed to preserving its legacy of quality and craftsmanship. Most recently, in July of 2023, Neil and Jennifer Gudekunst became the fourth family to steward this iconic Maine company, continuing its tradition of producing fine wooden marine products. Shaw & Tenney's dedication to quality and traditional methods has made it a cornerstone of Maine's fishing and maritime heritage, blending history and innovation in every handcrafted product. And now, back to the second half of this episode. So Josh, there must have been an aha moment with the net building.
So the aha moment didn't come, it wasn't some kind of revelation I had standing out in the river or anything like that. I had it on a fishing trip on a vacation where we went fishing. We went down to my mother-in-law's place in Florida.
Uh-huh.
We usually go down there yearly. We're in love with Sandville Island. I don't know if you've ever been down there.
No, I've heard a lot of good things.
Amazing fishing, amazing shells, just beautiful, beautiful beach. So we always try to go down there. I went down there, and this is when I was in therapy. I think that's important to point out. I hadn't had as connected a vacation with my family as I had other than that.
When were you in therapy?
I was in therapy.
You knew you needed help.
I knew I needed help.
Yeah.
I knew I needed help. When I had that dark time when I was thinking about taking my own life, I got into therapy. I got into the PTSD clinic up at Togus.
Sure.
And had a great therapist.
Good.
And still keep in touch with him here and there. I just was in the place where I was ready to do it. A lot of times you can't just say, hey, something's wrong. I got to get it fixed. You got to be ready to get into it.
Right.
And put the work in too. And that's what I did. I was in therapy. I had this amazing connected vacation with my family. We went fishing. We went to the beach. We just did great things, tons of smiles, tons of laughs, something that I hadn't experienced in some time. And while I was on that trip, I saw a wooden fishing net. And me being the person I am, I like to see things and then figure out how they're made and see if I can make it myself.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So I was like, oh, I think I can do that. So I came home, built my first mold out of some plywood, cut it by hand. Wasn't a pretty circle, as you saw from my early nets.
Your prototype.
My prototypes. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done. It was functional, and it was a step in the right direction. It's kind of a good stepping point. I enjoyed it. I liked bending the wood. Courtney wasn't happy because I was using the bathtub at the time. I didn't have a steam tube, so I was soaking the wood in her bathtub, and she wasn't able to use it. But to the early stages of building nets, it was a lot of trial and error, figuring out what works, what didn't. I started out doing it all handmade. These two over here, all handmade. So I would trace the pattern on a piece of wood, cut it on the bandsaw, sand it down. Took a lot of time, but I was enjoying myself while I was doing it.
Yeah.
I was connected. I was working on myself too. I was in here doing CPT, cognitive processing therapy,
Right.
while I'm doing these nets,
I love it.
thinking about
Cognitive
processing.
process therapy. Love it.
So I apologize to your listeners. I don't want to come off as some kind of expert on it, which I'm not. It's where you basically have a stuck point, right? So you might have a trauma and have a stuck point, like my life isn't worth anything. And then you work through questions systematically to prove or disprove that stuck point. So that's what I would be doing while I was out here. I'd be making nets, bending things up, sanding, and doing my therapy, doing my worksheets. And that's kind of what started it.
And along the way, you turned into a pretty damn good net maker.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, these are beautiful.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
A lot of trial and error, figuring things out, but it's part of the process. It taught me a lot about myself, kind of the bending, the shaping that we do. We got to be flexible.
You're speaking
Metaphorically.
Yeah.
We might come in one form, but through life and various changes and things, we transform into something different, but equally as beautiful.
Yeah.
So from metaphorical standpoint, that's how I see it. And funny enough, I find purpose in this.
Oh, yeah.
I find a great deal of purpose.
Well, you and I were talking earlier about how I have an affinity for working with wood as well. And there is really something you can relate to what I'm going to say next. You probably come in here thinking you're going to be in here for an hour and you spend the whole day in here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it happens to me a lot.
Yes. My wife can attest to that. I will tell her I'll begin in 5 minutes, and 2 hours later, I'll come in.
Yeah.
And just won't know where the time went, but I'll feel good.
Yeah.
I can't have a bad day, come in here, and then leave with that bad day.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's nice to have that.
And I think for our audience, we can say the same thing about just going to a river and fishing.
Oh, absolutely.
And that you cannot go to a river with the same amount of problems and leave with more of them.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
So can you think of a time when you went fly fishing and you came away with less problems?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the most recent, we lost one of our brothers to suicide. He was a firefighter. I don't want it to come off that we were super close or anything like that after the military, but it hurts the same. It's still a brother you lost, especially
Brother is the military brother?
Military brother.
Right.
Especially when it's to suicide. And I was struggling with that and the duality of my job and what I'm doing. And it really made me question things, right? Because you have my job and my purpose is that I serve veterans. I take care of veterans. This isn't saying that he wasn't taken care of. This is just how I looked at it. I'm serving a purpose. Did I fail? Or did something somehow fail him? And kind of struggling with it. So I went down to the river. It didn't go far. Went right up to the Presumpscot up here, and stood in the water. I don't know that I really even casted all that much. I just kind of stood there and had some time to think about life, how precious and fleeting it is, and that it's all on a time constraint. We don't have unlimited time.
No, we don't have unlimited time.
So,
and I'll share with you, because I'm older than you, that becomes more obvious to you as you're getting older and time is passing, is that you start to really take inventory of who you're spending time with and the kind of activities you're doing. And if you have toxic behavior, you start to evaluate it.
yes.
Toxic thinking,
Yes.
toxic friends, toxic relationships, you start to inventory those things.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you went through a transition.
I did. I stood there, and I can't say that I came off the water the same person that I went on with that problem, but it helped me through it. It helped me through that, losing a brother and losing my purpose.
So let me ask you a really personal question.
Sure.
Kind of the elephant in the room right now is we're talking about your brother committing suicide. Why is it that there is this high percentage of suicide connected with veterans? What's your perspective on that?
My perspective on that is exactly what I mentioned earlier. A lot of us do this thing called comparing, right? We want to compare our trauma. We want to say, oh, that guy's trauma is worse than mine, and I shouldn't feel this way. And when you don't have that to validate you, when you're invalidating yourself, your internal dialogue is invalidating, right? Then that creates this storm of emotions and feelings and hopelessness
And maybe self-loathing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's terrible. I remember too, when I was working with Project Healing Waters, we had a couple of guys that we all went up to the Smith River together. And one of the guys that I was really assigned to be with was on suicide watch. We're not going to use names, but he had just lost both of his legs in Iraq. He had been the quarterback of the high school football team, was married to the head cheerleader, right? All-American kid, physically reduced to just a shadow of who he had been just a year before.
Right.
He was in an Army hospital, and he was trying to kill himself multiple times. And we brought him out on the river and fly fished with 6 days straight on the Smith River. And at the end, he wasn't suicidal anymore. And I'm not trying to take anything away from your story, but it's a theme. You really give something up of yourself when you join the military. It's a sacrifice, and it has deep, long-lasting effects. Some are physical, some are emotional.
I don't think that you can join the military and not get out with some kind of trauma or some kind of anxiety, depression, adjustment disorder.
Yeah.
Something.
Right.
I don't believe that you can't, because of what you're asked to do on a daily basis.
Let's talk about Project Healing Waters.
Absolutely.
How'd you get involved?
That I kind of stumbled upon. I had heard about it briefly in the past and didn't really think much of it. And I kind of got into fly fishing first before I linked up with Project Healing Waters.
Did you get involved with the chapter at Togas?
I didn't.
No.
I reached out to them. I wanted to get involved, but because of time and proximity,
Yeah.
their meetings are, I think, Wednesday afternoons or something, which is hard if you work a full-time job, which is why we pushed me and my partner, the new regional director, Mark Root, to have a program here in Southern Maine. And as of this year, we have a budget and we're established, so we can start helping other people.
Yeah, exactly. And you yourself can get something out
And
of it.
I myself can get something.
So we used to take, when I worked with the Maine Guide Fly Shop, there was 4 or 5 of us that would take a day or two out and take the veterans out from Project Healing Waters from the Togas group. Are there still programs going on right now? I'm really speaking to the veteran that's listening to this podcast right now. Do you know if they're still doing outings that are being sponsored by guides or lodges or Maine sporting camps?
So I know that we're in the winter time now. So,
Right.
so we're doing a lot of fly tying. Sure. A lot of, sit down fly tying meetings, but there are groups that go out and do trips. The last one they did was this past fall, I believe. It was all of Maine. I think that was invited, all the Maine Project Healing Waters, but it was up in Acadia National Park.
Cool.
They did some camping and fly fishing up there with a guide.
Yep.
There are programs. There's one in Bangor, Machias, Southern Maine, and the Augusta program. So they're all over. And, you know, if you want any information about it, or any of your listeners do, they can always reach out to myself, Mark Root, or maybe you're a good contact for
or just go to the website.
Or just go to the website.
Yeah, Project Healing Waters has a really good website. Dave Folkerts was the head guy for Project Healing Waters. Ed Nicholson is the president of Project Healing Waters. But Dave Folkerts is kind of like the general. Or was.
Yeah.
He's not anymore?
They've gone through a transition period.
Yeah, sure.
And they brought on some new staff, new CEO. So they're under new management, some new leadership.
It's good for me to hear that. I didn't know.
But yeah, I have high hopes for the future and moving forward. As long as we're all in it to serve the purpose of healing veterans and helping each other.
Yeah.
Then that's.
It works.
Yeah, it does.
I'm firsthand, man. I can tell you, I've seen transitions in people. There's a gal that will go unnamed that really struggles. Think, wheelchair.
Yeah.
And still fly fishes to this day on her own.
Amazing.
It wasn't just a one and done thing. It changes people's lives.
It does.
And I hope it continues to change your life.
I call it the meaningless pursuit of trout.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because and meaningless, meaning it's not meaningless at all, right? It's so meaningful. But what are we doing, right? What's the purpose of what we're doing?
I think to the casual observer, it looks purposeless.
Right.
But to me, it's everything. It's my life.
It is.
Yeah. I enjoy, and the older I get, the more I enjoy doing it with other people. There was a long period of time where I did a lot of fishing just on my own and really enjoyed it. And I still do some fishing on my own, particularly when I travel to the Bahamas, but I much prefer the company of the people that I'm spending time with, because that's part of the healing for me too. Healing in a different way. We all, independent of if you were a veteran or you weren't, every life is full of struggles.
Full of struggles. Full of struggles, full of trauma. Everybody has their own story. And that's part of this too, is that I'm not just making nets. I want to make nets with a story. I want to make a product with a story.
Well, let's talk about the nets in detail, because one of the things I'm noticing, again, it's an audio podcast, so you can't see it, but we'll put up some great photography. Sherry and I will put up some great photography on our website and a blog post for your episode. Explain in your own words what you're doing with these, the pictorial of the river. So what am I looking at there?
So with these, let me grab one here so we can reference it. I really wanted to pay some respect, because that's kind of what I like to do. Respect what came before us and what we have now. So I really wanted to honor the lakes and streams and rivers of Maine. And I thought, what better way to do that than to epoxy it into a net?
So really the shape of the river.
Yeah.
And so how do you capture that image? Do you get it off from like Google Earth or?
So I'll get it off of Google Earth and I'll hand draw it. I'll hand draw it on my iPad. I'll take it to my engraver, engrave the river, and then I go and backfill it with epoxy.
So is it laser engraved? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have someone that does that for you?
No, I do that.
Oh, you do that?
I do that here.
Oh, fantastic. So the net never leaves your shop until it's done.
It never leaves my shop until it's done. It comes in as a board, as a walnut 5/4 board, and leaves as a net.
Yeah, and they're beautiful. They're very well made.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so the name of the net company, Mayfly, how did that come to you?
Mayfly. I'm glad you asked. I think we kind of got there earlier, but got away from it. Is one, my grandmother, Nana May. Her name was May.
Yeah.
So I wanted to honor her and the things she taught me and the life lessons she taught me. And I kind of wanted to highlight the life of the mayfly too, right? It's so important in the ecological system.
Oh, it is.
But also its life is short, fleeting, right? It lives for a very, very short time as an adult. which begs the question, what's the purpose? But without that thing, a whole ecological system would die.
That's right.
Right? So your purpose doesn't necessarily need to feel all that big or look all that big to have a great impact.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So that's kind of what I wanted to do with Mayfly as a name.
Well, it's totally applicable.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mayflies are all over the world.
they are.
Yeah. And they're a beautiful insect too.
They are.
You know, I'm starting to study more about them because I've been going out west and fishing out there in Idaho with some friends, and they have very technical hatches out there. We don't really know hatches in Maine. We do have a lot of caddis hatches as an example, and we do have mayfly hatches, but not millions and millions and millions of them, so much that you can't see through them to see the other side of the river.
Right.
And that's really cool. And they're really a beautiful insect. Yeah. But let's do this. Let's go bring Courtney in.
Yep.
Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Courtney, tell me a little bit about Josh Brown.
Oh, Lord.
Not like what you met, but what do you love about him?
What do I love about him? He is adventurous in the ways that I can be really grounded and reserved. So he's always challenged me to try new things and to try hard things. He's a really dedicated person. One of the things that struck me about him very early on was his desire to do good, to help other people.
I can see that. That comes out in meeting him.
Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as giving someone an extra hockey stick or a pair of skates. But in other ways, it's more deep personal sacrifice to make sure that people are really cared for and can advocate for themselves in ways that maybe they don't know how to.
Yeah. I think he found a good place with his current career.
I think so too.
And he shared with me that you helped him get into that.
Yes, I've been in the VA since 2019. And the ER was good and exciting, but we have 3 children and they're young and the shifts are long and the work is hard. And we both thought that maybe it could be a good transition to have more of a normal life.
Yeah.
Monday through Friday, because that's something we've never had. We've been married for almost 16 years and we've never really had that normal rhythm. The VA opportunity came up and we did work together in that same clinic for a period of time. And he's just someone who's always going to go the extra mile to make sure that people are taken care of.
Yeah. Well, that's what a nurse does. Yeah. That's great. Well, it really means everything that you contacted us to be on the podcast because you have a great story and you have a great product. I mean, the nets are going to be a winner.
I really, really appreciate it.
For sure. And I think that I learned a lot more about your life than I had anticipated hearing about. And I know that's really hard to open up about that stuff. And I really appreciate you sharing it because it sounds like you don't share a lot of that with people.
No, I don't. I have never done anything like this, nor did I think that I would do this.
Yeah.
But,
can I let you in on a little secret?
Yeah.
Most people that are on the podcast have never been on the podcast before, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2. So that's not news to me.
Okay.
And I actually prefer it because I think that we have a more genuine conversation.
Yeah.
If someone wants to buy a Mayfly net, where do they go?
They can go to our website, www.mayflynets.com, and get one off there. Or you can contact me directly. You can always contact me through Instagram, email.
Maybe even give you a call.
Give me a call. Our phone number is 207-712-7174.
Yeah. And so what I think makes this really neat is, let's say you have a favorite river. Maybe you like to fish the East Outlet of the Kennebec, or maybe you like to fish the Fish River up in the county. What Josh does is he's laser engraving a net personalized for you with the outline of that river and the name of that river right on it, which is really, really neat. Of course, it'll work in other waters.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But thanks again for being on the podcast. It means everything to us.
Thank you so much for doing this and having me and being willing to share my story and listen.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for joining us for this intimate discussion, and thank you for listening to Flyline Podcast. A new Flyline podcast episode will be released every 2 weeks on Tuesdays, so be sure to come back to meet our next famous guest. Until then, this is Michael Jones, and we invite you to visit the blog section of our website to enjoy photos and contributions from our guests and experience all of our episodes at flylinepodcast.com.